The topic of functions is mostly about language. We're going to start with the definition of a function. Any relation, we know a relation to be any correspondence between two variables. We know that that could be defined numerically, graphically, symbolically, right? In this case, we have two relations that are defined by diagrams. Each arrow represents an ordered pair. If in the relation each input has exactly one output, then we call that relation a function. So it's easiest to understand by first looking at an example of an input that does not have exactly one output, for which we will look at number of cylinders. Here we can see that an 8-cylinder engine might be a 3.0 liter, or it might be a 3.8 liter. There's more possibilities than just these, but this is here to illustrate a relationship between number of cylinders and engine size. 8 is our input, and we can see that the input 8 has two outputs. This is what it looks like when we violate the definition of a function. It's going to feel a little bit different. The process for spotting it is going to feel a little bit different in each representation of a function, but this is what's going on in each case. Now, if we contrast that with what's going on with the median income example, even though we have the output of 72 with 3 arrows coming into it, this is fine. This does not violate the definition of a function. It's okay to have repeated outputs. It's okay to have the output 72 go with 3 different inputs. What we can't have is an input that generates more than one output. So if we have any input at all that violates the definition, we say that the whole thing is not a function. So this relation here is not a function. But if we can look at all of the inputs and see that that is never violated, then we can conclude that it is, in fact, a function. So our median income example is a function. Our engine size by number of cylinders example is not a function. Just like we defined domain and range when talking about relations, there we said the domain was the set of all x values. That was a little bit specific because we hadn't established this idea of an input yet. Here we say that the domain is the set of all inputs. So with our median income example, the domain is all of these states. And the range is the set of all outputs, which is where the arrows are pointing to. So the range is going to be the set of all median incomes. Now we can designate these by the x variable, but we don't have to call it x and y in order to talk about it as being domain and range. So we can write down the domain of this. I'm going to use postal abbreviations just to make it go a little more quickly. Alabama is AL. Indiana is IN. Alaska is AK. Colorado is CO. Illinois is IL. And Massachusetts is MA. And the range is the median incomes. So I have 55, 65, 72, and 83. Now these are sets. I don't care about the fact that 72 is in 3 different ordered pairs. I'm only going to write it once to indicate that it is in the domain. I mean the range, sorry. It is in the range. So here we're still thinking about the definition of a function when we're asking the question, is the relation a function? This has to do with the definition of a function. We want to see if in either of these two relations defined numerically, if it's ever the case that an input is mapped to 2 different outputs. So I could think of this in the sense of a diagram. My inputs are 1, 3, and 5. And I can see that if my input is 1, I have an output of 2, or I have an output of 9. So it looks like this. And therefore I can see that this first one is not a function. It doesn't matter what's going on with 3 and 5. As soon as I find any violation, I rule it out. Looking at this second one, I can see 1, 3, 7, and 5 don't repeat at all, so each one is going to be mapped to an output. If I have no repeating x values here, or repeating inputs, then I do have a function. There's no way that one of these inputs could be mapped to two outputs if it doesn't repeat. So that's what I really look for. I don't have to draw this diagram in order to identify it. I really just want to look for repeating inputs.